Hello, Star Trek fans. Welcome to ReBinge It. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 2, Episode 10, Cold Fire. This episode aired November 13th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, Tattoo?
That was a remarkably forgettable episode that everybody involved with should just gloss over and never talk of again.
I barely even remember us talking about it. It seems so long ago. I've been all the way to Finland and back since we had that conversation.
Yes.
So I've put it out of my mind.
That could be good advice. If you want to forget about the episode, just go to Finland.
Go to Finland.
Yeah.
Right on the Ferris wheel, go on a boat cruise, come back. Not a cruise ship. That's never going to happen. This was just, I don't know, like a ferry.
Yes.
Those are fine.
Well, I don't think we've ever told our listeners about Kim's view on cruise ships.
No, I think you've told them. Maybe it was on the previous podcast, but I think you've told them.
There's an encouragement for people to go and listen to all the other podcasts because I don't remember which episode it's on.
Not a fan.
So, should we get started?
Yes, you have the notes. I watched this episode on an airplane, so my notes are sparse, but I'm ready to go.
Okay. Well, we open with a kind of extended previously on.
Yes.
Explaining Voyager's plot, read by the computer, also known as Majel Barrett, and the flashback ends with 10 months later.
Yeah, finally we know how long it's been.
Yes. I assume this opening was because of syndication, so if you were watching it in syndication, you'd have some idea what was happening in this episode?
Yeah, I guess so. It's like they had to remind you of the whole point.
Yeah.
It almost like this would have made sense at the beginning of season 2
right.
as an explanation. And of course, now we get this in front of most of the episodes of modern Star Trek. Yeah. They give us a little recap of what's going on just in case we missed something. But it seems funny that they had to remind us at this point as we're, 20 episodes in or so.
I assume it's because at some point someone watched it and went, what is going on here? So that, because that was the whole goal of these old shows. They wanted to sell them into syndication. Back to Voyager, and Tuvok is helping Kes train to use her telepathic abilities, which appear to be working as she can hear the voices of the crew. Tuvok asks her to focus on a single person, and she settles on Neelix, who's babbling about having a haircut. Kes ends up laughing at Neelix because, he's Neelix, and Tuvok breaks the link, telling her she needs to control these emotional outbursts, and he'll teach her a Vulcan mind control technique to help her inhibit her giggles. The Vulcans are not the species you want around for fun or amusement.
I love that Tuvok is like, you giggled, you ruined it, get out.
Emotional outburst.
Yeah. How dare you?
Tim Russ's portrayal of Tuvok, I think, really emphasizes those aspects of the Vulcans that really are alien. And here I think we see the real heart of the Vulcans and their emotional outburst. She just giggled.
I know, it's really cute. I wonder if at the end of the day of acting, did he just explode with emotion after having to be so flat all day on set?
Now off to Sickbay, and Kes is arriving late. The doctor is interested in what she learned, and it seems like she's making a lot of progress. However, the doctor is a little irritated by these mind studies, as he calls it, as they're interfering with her work schedule.
She can't win. She's got the crabby Vulcan and the crabby hologram.
Yeah, but the doctor's complaining is cut short as they both hear a high-pitched tone and some rattling. They find it's coming from a rattling rock in a storage cupboard. We get a close-up on the rock and it's rattling around and it's emitting these high-pitched squeaking noises. As soon as the doc starts scanning it, it abruptly stops, leaving a very confused-looking Doctor and Kes as we go into the opening credits. Okay, did you have any idea what that thing was?
No, because I don't think it looked the same as the rock they actually picked up. And also, it's really strange that we are keeping it in Sickbay. It was like the doctor walked over, opened a microwave, and there was the rock. It's like, what?
Yeah. Shouldn't you be keeping it in a more secure environment?
I guess the reason that you know that's what it is because they did that intro at the beginning where they reminded you.
Yeah.
Did you notice the flickering at the top of the screen throughout this whole episode? This is another one of these episodes with an artifacting problem or something.
Yeah, it looked like it was in the old NTSC transmissions. They would have like one of the blank lines. They would put information in it. Like in the UK, it used to be teletext. And it looks like when they did the transfer, they didn't blank that part of the frame out.
Oh, yeah, it's annoying. It's in this whole episode.
It's a weird oversight, and it seems like a lot of the transfers are just kind of lazy. Like, they have an automated system. Somebody throws the VHS into their encoder and goes, yeah, good enough.
Yeah, close enough.
The nerds will watch it.
Well, they're not wrong.
After the credits, we return to Sickbay, and everyone is now looking at the rock, the doctor telling Janeway that it was showing life signs, but these ceased before he could do further analysis. Janeway finds it hard to believe it came to life for several seconds, and Tuvok does point out that the rock is the remains of an entity they never fully understood. Plus, I think he could also point out that since they've been in the Delta Quadrant, Harry has come back from the dead, plus that other alien woman they brought back from the dead and then killed a little bit later. So maybe that's the thing in the Delta Quadrant. Things just keep on coming back to life.
I saw somebody online complaining that them taking the remains of that alien with them went against that other episode where Chakotay didn't want to disturb the bodies on that asteroid. But I don't see how this is the same thing because they felt that they had to destroy that array, right, in order to save the Ocampa. And so if they had, then they would have just been destroying the remains. So I guess they took them along to stop from doing that.
Yeah, it's very different because Chakotay's concern was desecrating the burial site of this culture. And this case was you had a dead alien body and you took it with you.
And you put it in a microwave in Sickbay.
Yeah, that's a better resting place, I guess.
That noise that it made every time it did the little vibrating thing was really irritating.
I don't think they directly say these are the remains of the Caretaker at this point.
At this point, before the credits, no, I don't think they do.
As they're discussing what to do next, the rock again starts whistling and vibrating, and B'Elanna now detects life signs. Sporocystian, like the Caretaker. She concludes the rock isn't alive, it's just resonating in response to another life form nearby. Janeway jumps into action, ordering Harry to scan for Sporocystian life forms, and sure enough, he finds a Sporocystian energy burst 10 light years away. They now hatch a plan to track down the Caretaker's mate because she might have the ability to send them back home. Tuvok is a little concerned about how powerful the Caretaker was and wants a backup plan, asking permission to create a Sporocystian toxin to, as he describes it, debilitate the life form. Janeway naturally approves the plan. I mean, if she can't use phasers on it, then an alien nerve gas, good second option.
She does look at Chakotay for a second, but he uselessly says nothing. She's like, yeah, okay.
Was she looking for a second opinion? Was she looking for Chakotay to say, wait a minute, you're using chemical weapons?
I don't know, but he did nothing. Tuvok was also the one who said this alien might have the ability to send us home. I mean, that's awfully positive for Tuvok. It made a lot more sense when he next said, we need a weapon.
I don't know. I think actually, logically, it would make sense because the Caretaker had the ability, the technology, the understanding how to send them halfway across the galaxy. Therefore, another member of that alien race might have access to the same level of technology. So I don't think it's that big a jump.
Well, no, but remember, this is the guy who in season 1 was always worried that people were getting their hopes up too high.
Oh, true. Yeah. But I think this is a good logical deduction for a Vulcan.
Okay. I do love, there's just a moment when we get that little bit of hope from Janeway, and they just play a hint of the Voyager theme song. I love it.
Yeah, once again, in this episode, they use music quite well.
Mm-hmm.
On the bridge, Tom reports they're picking up life signs, and in engineering, B'Elanna and Harry use the rock to find where the other Sporocystian life signs are coming from. Janeway orders maximum warp, and we get a nice FX shot of Voyager raising its nacelles and jumping to warp. Love it. It's such a good-looking ship.
It is.
Still on the bridge, and they pick up a structure on the long-range sensors, and we see what looks like a space station exactly like the Caretaker's array. Harry points out it's a lot smaller, and there are no Sporocystian life forms aboard. He does, however, pick up life signs of over 2,000 Ocampa. And I think I've already said Sporocystian about 150 times in this episode already.
I didn't even type it one time into my notes.
Tuvok hails the station, but there's no response. And they start firing at Voyager. Chakotay is in fine form here, as after they've been hit twice, he states, definitely weapons fire.
Yeah, thanks, Chakotay.
I think this warranted a full Janeway maneuver at this point, coupled with a well duh from Tuvok.
Thanks.
The array finally responds with a guy telling them, you're not wanted here. You have been warned, and cuts transmission.
Crabby.
Back from a dramatic ad break, and Janeway is telling Kes of the Ocampa and how the station is over 300 years old. We learn that Kes has never heard of Ocampa leaving the homeworld, and Janeway asks her to act as an intermediary. Kes does seem very excited by the prospect of other Campa being out in space and in the quadrant.
It is interesting that there wouldn't even be any stories of anyone leaving.
It makes me wonder what Ocampa record keeping is like. Do they keep any records? Is it just oral history?
Yeah, there's no time for it. We don't have much time. We don't want to waste it doing paperwork.
Not really. Yes. Oh, that's funny. They call the array again, and Mr. Krabby is equally as grumpy, and Kes introduces herself, and he agrees to meet. Now in a briefing room, Mr. Grumpy is there along with another guy, who asks if Voyager is looking for the other caretaker to destroy them. These new Ocampa go on to explain how Voyager is regarded in the sector. When it appears, people fear destruction, and how it's known as a ship of death. This seems quite shocking to Janeway.
Well, yeah.
He continues, citing, they killed the caretaker, started a war with the Kazon, and raided planets for their resources. Oh.
And I love how Chakotay's like, that's not what happened. Well, it's kind of what happened.
Little bit what happened.
It's a little bit what happened. It's such a good example of how things can look so differently from a different point of view.
Yeah. As you said, Chakotay tells them this isn't true, and Tuvok points out they did not kill the caretaker. And now, Krabby Guy actually gets a name. Janeway refers to him as Mr. Tanis, and she tells him they only want to find the entity. Then Tanis uses telepathy to tell Kes he wants to talk to her alone. And Kes seems very surprised by this development. Mm-hmm. Now alone with Tanis, Kes explains how these are kind people. They saved her life at risk to their own, and they wouldn't lie to him. He asks to see where she lives on the ship, and we're off to her hydroponics bay with all her plants.
It's an aeroponics bay.
Oh.
I don't know why that's different, but I noticed that in the closed captions.
I called it hydroponics bay. Oh.
So did I in my notes, but it's aeroponics.
Better get it right or we'll get letters. Tanis is very dismissive of Voyager here, calling it sterile and how there's so little life there, criticizing all the bulkheads and corridors. He gives this great sense of being just really full of himself.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of, remember Gath from Prime Factors? That sort of arrogant...
Oily G.
Yes, Oily G, as you called him.
Yeah, he does remind me a little bit of Oily G. Not quite as oily. Maybe a little more sinister.
Oh, yeah.
He feels... It's almost like the way they light him or something, but they make him seem quite sinister.
Right. Kes asks him, how is it different? Because he lives on a space station. And he just says, oh, I assure you it's very different. But he doesn't elaborate.
It's like those cities in the 37s. We never get to see it, but we have to believe it.
Oh, yes, the wonderful cities that we don't have the budget to show.
Exactly.
I think this is a red flag here, that he doesn't go into specifics about the station. Because I think if they did, it would all be a giant shrine to the cult of the caretaker.
Oh, like the one that they had on Deep Space Nine to Gul Dukat. Or it was on Empok Nor.
Oh, yes. Exactly the same thing. There'll be a big mural of Caretaker 2.
Mm-hmm.
Tanis now starts bragging, as if he could be any more smug and condescending, telling her how he's 14 years old. He tells Kes, you know so little about your own people, and being on Voyager is holding her back. He goes on to tell her how Suspiria brought them to this station 300 years ago, and began to teach them how to be stronger. They don't think of her as a caretaker, and we learn her species is called the Nacine. He cryptically says, she's nearby, telling Kes she's very different from the caretaker. He was only interested in maintaining the status quo, keeping the Ocampa servile and weak. Superior taught these Ocampa to use their psychokinetic skills that have been dormant for so long. And I think this guy should be giving everyone the creeps at this point. Just the language should be a little concerning.
Yeah, it's quite alarming what he's saying. I mean, on the one hand, it's really interesting to say that all that other caretaker wanted to do was just maintain the status quo and not let them evolve.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, we saw that, right? He was just trying to protect them like they were injured birds rather than trying to find a way to help them. But there's always danger in the helping of some species to evolve too quickly. And that I sort of felt like that's what they were hinting at here.
And this feels like what happens when the Prime Directive goes wrong.
Right.
Tanis now demonstrates to Kes how they can enhance life by causing the plants in the bay to grow and flower, telling her, this is only the start.
There's a shot here where he sort of, Tanis, walks in front of the camera and kind of turns, and you see at the top of the outfit that he's wearing, like on the back of his neck, that he's got a lot of back hair. And that really made me laugh because it's such a 90s thing. I mean, they had to wax that off right now. You'd never see that on our TV. Maybe they thought you couldn't see it because the quality of the video wasn't good enough. But
everyone was watching it on a 19-inch Target TV. Nobody could see that stuff.
Oh, no, you weren't buying TVs from Target in those days.
Oh, yeah, you were.
They had whole TV stores, which don't exist anymore.
I'm going to say yes, you were, because they were cheap at Target.
Yeah.
And for any of our Gen Z listeners, you can look up what a TV store was.
And these were tubes. Giant, heavy tube televisions.
Tube TV story. We once had a 42-inch tube TV. And when we gave it to recycling, no joke, they had 3 guys carrying that thing. It was so heavy.
That thing, we thought it would have to remain with the house because it was so heavy.
Kes is now in a briefing, and Janeway congratulates her on opening a dialogue, but she also asks Kes to be careful in her dealings with Tanis. They know very little about him, except he's extremely smug.
It's good Janeway is expressing caution. Yeah. I mean, it's quite wise, but I'm not sure that she would take that advice herself.
Good point. Yeah. We get a short scene where Tanis appears to be on the station, and he's talking to someone telepathically who tells him she doesn't care about the girl. She's yours. Bring me the ship. And into a dramatic ad break.
Creepy.
Yes, and all the lighting is sort of dimmed and the way he's sitting there. Yeah, they're really playing up the... If you haven't realized it, this guy's a little bit villainous.
And they're so careful to just show... We've talked about this before, like it's just this one guy. They had that scene where they were in the conference room and there was the other guy that had one line. We never see him again. And there was also an Ocampa woman in that scene, but you just barely see the side of her head, just enough to see her ear. You don't actually see her face and she has no lines.
I didn't notice that. Wow.
Yeah, it's right on the edge of the scene as it begins.
I'm going to have to go back and watch that now.
It's so funny to me how we do that. It's just this whole city or this whole community of thousands of people. We just see the one person. And we're like, these guys are evil.
Oh. Back to Voyager, and we're having a formal dinner, and Tanis is explaining they have technology that extends Ocampa lifespan, and his own father lived until he was 20. He also seems to be referring openly to Suspiria. So I guess he's not keeping that a secret, who she is or what her name is?
Well, no. At this point, she said she's going to destroy the ship, so it doesn't matter. Suspiria, I mean.
He hasn't led on to them, that's a plan.
No. But, that's the point of why it doesn't matter if they know her name.
Janeway asks where Suspiria lives, and Tanis explains she lives non-corporeally as pure Sporocystian energy. And I should keep a running count here of the number of times I say Sporocystian.
I don't know why you're working so hard.
She only assumes physical form when she needs to communicate. He offers to take them to the meeting place and then drops a bombshell. He invites Kes to stay with the Ocampa on the station. Janeway, being the good captain and good leader, steps in, telling Kes, for something this important, give it some thought. Tanis also offers to help Kes with the training of her mental abilities and seems a bit pushy by saying, how about this evening? I feel this guy is being really kind of pushy and I feel like trying to overwhelm Kes. He's definitely some kind of predator.
Yeah, he does seem suspicious for sure. Probably because of the way they light him, but also the way they introduced him in the beginning. It is in this scene, though, this sort of diplomatic dinner that they're having. It's nice that Neelix isn't reverting to that jealousy nonsense, But instead, he actually just looked a little concerned that he might be left behind, which I would say that's a much more reasonable concern and makes sense in this situation.
Good point,
I'm really happy to see that we're sticking with that.
Yes, that's a much better way of showing Neelix's concerns. Off to engineering, and Tuvok is holding some bizarre-looking piece of tech, which apparently is a highly reactive sporocystian toxin. It would cause temporary paralysis on one of the creatures. And this thing looks like either a giant drill or a syringe for elephants. It was a very odd-looking piece of gear. Kind of cool, though.
It definitely looks like a syringe for elephants. That's what I thought, too. But it's Chekhov's syringe. It's going to come up again.
Because they're going to use it. In the mess, Tanis is working with Kes, trying to teach her to use the Force. Neelix is kind of funny here, as he's sort of poking around in the background, trying to be quiet.
Trying to be a part of it.
Yes. And Kes manages to move a cup just using her mind. And I'm pretty sure this guy has some Jedi training, because he keeps on delivering Yoda-like sayings of wisdom, like, focus on the goal, not the task.
I 100% at this point thought Tanis was doing it, that he was manipulating Kes.
Yes. On my rewatching of it, I'm like, oh, is he doing all of this?
Yeah. And I'm not entirely sure still that he wasn't.
Yeah. Tanis now asks Kes to try one more thing and shows her how to make the molecules of the liquid move faster with her mind, and the cup of tea starts to boil, much to the surprise of both Kes and Neelix. Tanis leaves, promising to teach more tomorrow. Then Kes asks Neelix if he'd go with her if she decides to stay with the evil Ocampa. And he tells her he'd go anywhere with her.
Yeah, but will they want Neelix there? I mean, I'm serious. I'm not actually joking. They seem like they might be the kind that doesn't want strangers.
Yes, that's a good evaluation. We get a quick shot of Voyager in space as Janeway is recording a log, and they've arrived at the meeting place where Suspiria exists. But they don't detect anything on sensors, and Tanis sends out a signal to her. Kes is back training with Tuvok and attempts to demonstrate her psychokinetic manipulation of matter. However, it goes horribly wrong. Not only does she heat the liquid, but it gets out of hand, the cup breaks, and she starts cooking Tuvok, who begins bleeding from his nose and his face is all puffed up, and Kes is screaming as Tuvok falls to the ground and into another dramatic ad break.
Why do his eyes go all yellow? Because he's burning up from the inside.
I did notice as well, Kes was very sweaty again here. Is that like the head writer's thing?
Yeah, we did have a little bit of condensation.
And they keep on adding, and then she gets all sweaty.
She's got her own personal mister. That person just comes up and sprays her in the face with water. Apparently, we forgot to show Kes how to stop when she got going.
It was good makeup effects here. Tuvok looked pretty rough.
Yeah, he did.
Although I do fail to see how this was not fatal.
Right? I mean, he wakes up in the next scene fine. It's like, all right.
Off to sickbay, and as Kim said, Tuvok is now fine. And the doctor explains how his blood rose 37 degrees and he had to be resuscitated. Okay, is that a Vulcan thing? Because I think that if this was the Fahrenheit scale, you'd be dead for 37 degrees. And if it was the centigrade scale, you'd definitely be dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we don't know. He's a Vulcan. Maybe they can take higher temperatures.
Yeah, the surface of some parts of Vulcan is pretty austere and hot.
But I agree. This was a bit abrupt from how he went from the yellow eyes and the green blood coming out of his nose to, I'm fine.
I'm good. It's also funny because when the doc tries to get Tuvok on light duties, Tuvok is like, oh, my Vulcan healing techniques do not require an extended period of convalescence.
Right.
And the doctor says, yeah, Vulcans make the worst patients.
I think Klingons would be worse. Vulcans would be annoying, but Klingons would be worse.
Klingons would come to you when their arm is half falling off and go, 'tis but a scratch.
Yeah. Sew it back on. I got to go back out.
Yeah. That is very true. Well, we saw some of that with Worf when he was fighting the Jem'Hadar in prison.
Yeah, there was some of that with Martog, too.
Kes is feeling very guilty about this accident, but Tuvok tells her to look at it as a learning experience, and he still wants to continue her training, telling her that if this experience proves anything, she needs further instruction. That was pretty fearless of Tuvok.
Yeah. It's also the logical response, though, right? The emotional response would be to go, oh, I'm not doing that again. But logically, he's like, oh, she's very powerful. She needs to learn how to control this so she doesn't do it to someone else.
That's a very logical point, Kim.
And maybe he's like got some kind of a monitor now that, the doctor is quickly on call.
If you get cooked, press this button.
Right.
One more thing before we leave the scene. Tuvok says he would regret not continuing as her instructor. Regret is an emotional response.
Well, that's a good point.
Was this the universal translator turning a Vulcan phrase into one that another species would understand?
Yeah, because I'm wondering if what he's saying there is he might regret it because it could ultimately cause harm to the crew. So there could be something bad that happens later that he could have prevented. So not so much about the emotional part of it as there may be some impending danger if I don't make the logical decision now, and put the harm to me aside.
Yeah.
So it could have just been a translation issue of the word.
Voyager is now just still hanging around in space as Kes meets Tanis in the garden again, the aeroponics or hydroponics, whichever one it is. I'm going to have to go and look that up now.
Memory Alpha said aeroponics and the closed caption said aeroponics. So I'm going with it, but I honestly did not Google what the difference would be between an aeroponics and a hydroponics. Something to do with air and water. I don't know.
Kes is concerned that if she can't control her abilities, there could be another accident.
Yeah.
And the true nature of Tanis starts to come out here as he tells her she's starting to manifest abilities far beyond anything she imagined. And soon, she'll be so far ahead of the others on Voyager, they'll look like pets to her.
Yeah.
Pets. Really?
There's your red flag. I mean, Kes doesn't even see the doctor as a hologram, so it doesn't seem likely that she's going to see people as pets. I think part of the difference is these people have evolved, like you said, through all of these generations, and here it's just Kes in a couple of days.
10 months, in fact.
Yeah.
So we see that Tanis is an Ocampa supremacist. He probably hangs out with the founders. Tanis continues telling her the beings on this ship are trapped. They're restricted by the physical, and that using her mind, she could reach out and touch some flowers, and to touch them as only the Ocampa can. Kes is a quick learner, and we see the flowers glowing as she reaches out with her mind. And now Tanis tells her to reach out and feel all the life in the room. And whoever's doing the video production now turns the color balance all the way up high, so it looks like everything is glowing.
Yeah.
It was a really simple effect, but it's quite stunning when you see it on screen.
Yeah, I thought it was a mistake at first. I was like, what is wrong with my iPad?
Sometimes the simplest things can work. Upping the color balance worked really well.
Oh, yeah.
Tanis now pushes Kes further, telling her to bring the fire, and we go into an overhead shot of Kes putting out her hands and being surrounded by flames. When the flames dissipate, Kes is lying on the floor, and all the plants in the room are burned and cooked.
Yikes.
Kes says this is like what happened to Tuvok, but she doesn't want to hurt people. Tanis is back to being extremely smug and dismissive, saying, that's not the point. Hurt people, help them, give them life, kill. It's all the same.
Yeah.
Beyond the physical, you see how the universe really is.
It's all the same was a scary line.
Yeah. Kes, this guy might be a problem.
I know. And he says something about her transforming in life. It's like, that's not what that was. That was killing something that was living. Transforming it to dead, I guess, is what he meant.
He says she can't stay with these people and how she has to come with him, telling her, come back to the station. They'll care for her there and train her. Kes still isn't convinced, and Tanis tells her, when you meet Suspiria, you'll make up your mind.
And she does.
She asks why. And it gets really ominous, as Tanis replies, because Suspiria is your future.
Creepy.
He tells her that Suspiria is part of them, and that all the Ocampa here are connected to her in a way he can't put into words. Totally not disturbing and slightly worrying. Finally, he says, if she develops her abilities far enough, Suspiria will invite her to Exosia, a place of pure thought, pure energy, and a place of mind. And then, like a true cult underling says, when you're ready, Suspiria will embrace you. Kes, immediately go to Janeway and tell her all this.
Yeah.
This is a little bit disturbing, or perhaps discuss it with the doctor. This is very cult-like behavior.
Yeah, there's so many red flags here. So a couple of things about this scene. First, I really felt like the actress in this scene playing Kes, that she did a really good job here of showing that she was young and naive. They tell us that a lot. They have characters who say it to her quite frequently, but I thought she did a good job of showing it here. Like showing her vulnerability, also showing maybe her tendency to sort of cling to someone who knows more than her, right? And kind of shows her that she's also got some power, so it enables her to feel more mature than she actually is. Yeah. I thought that was a really good scene on her part.
I think it also showed her connection to other Ocampa.
Yes. I also was trying to figure out what in the heck is happening here. Because could this have been sort of a metaphor of drug use? Like he's really pushing it on her. I think maybe your cult thing makes sense as well as what they were doing.
Yeah.
But he's really pushing this very bad thing on her. And at the same time, I kept thinking, now, is she doing this or is he doing this to just show her, to convince her to come with him? Like, look at all this power you have, when in reality, he's doing it all along.
Do you want me to go into overanalysis here?
Sure.
Suspiria is enabling it. Kes has these abilities, but maybe they come over years of training. Suspiria is short-circuiting the development process. That her abilities, whatever she has, is allowing the Ocampa to do this. Or Tanis is acting as a conduit for Suspiria. I think Kes is really doing them. It's just Tanis and Suspiria are giving her the abilities to be able to do more than she could on her own.
To do it faster. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe the Ocampa can't naturally do these things and need Suspiria to do them.
Yeah. I mean, that would really lean into the cult part of it, and then it's more about Suspiria than it is about the Ocampa.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Either way, this was a good scene.
I would agree. Tanis felt very manipulative, and you really see that very negative universe view.
Right.
Everybody but us is just lower beings. It really is almost founder-like.
Yeah, and the way he kept saying to her, take all the time you need, to this is like, time's up.
Yeah, time's up. Voyager is still parked in space, and B'Elanna reports the Caretaker rock is resonating again. On the bridge, Harry says a subspace rupture has opened ahead of them. And in engineering, B'Elanna says she's getting some pretty strange readings. And behind her, we see purple tentacles snaking down from the ceiling.
Never good. Tentacles, never good.
Harry tells Janeway that there's some kind of plasmatic energy field forming in engineering. But when she calls B'Elanna, there's no response. Tuvok immediately heads to engineering, calling for a security team. And in the episode, we start getting a lot of very short, quick cut scenes. Yep. Kes is sitting alone in the mess, and Tanis comes in to tell her it's time to go. The connection has been made, and her future has already begun.
Oh yeah, this is the part where it's like, okay, take all the time you need, time's up.
Back to engineering, and Tuvok calls Janeway, telling her he believes the female Caretaker is here. And in a terrible decision, Janeway leaves the bridge, leaving Chakotay in charge. Quick cut back to Tanis, and he's still pressuring Kes, saying her people are calling to her, and she can hear them. In engineering, it appears deserted, except for a small girl who's sitting on the floor, holding the dead Caretaker rock and crying. She introduces herself as Suspiria, and we see yet another scary little girl in Voyager.
They do like they're scary kids.
Yeah.
I mean, kids are scary.
Only when it comes to catching and spreading colds.
No, they make super scary bad guys in horror movies. I don't know why.
That's very true.
The kids are just so scary.
Cut back to Kes, who tells Tanis she can feel Suspiria's presence, saying she's powerful, turbulent, upset, and angry, and she wants to destroy the ship. Engineering again, and Janeway is explaining to Suspiria how they were brought here by the Caretaker against their will and haven't been able to find a way back. Suspiria replies, "Is that why you killed him?" Janeway protests, but Suspiria isn't interested, saying, "You destroyed the array and you took his remains." The little girl's voice now changes to the voice we heard earlier when Tanis was talking to Suspiria. And she says to Janeway, "You killed him, and now I will kill you."
Ugh.
You looked this up and said it was Nigel Barrett again.
Yeah, it's the computer's voice, but she's speaking differently, so it doesn't sound exactly like her. But it's creepy when it switches from the kid to Magil.
I didn't notice that. That was a great catch.
Mm-hmm.
Janeway backs away from the devil child and notices blood on her shoulder.
Oh.
Looking up, she finally sees B'Elanna and Tuvok suspended in the air above her.
That was so creepy. Anytime that happens in a scary movie when blood drips onto the person, oh, Lord. I'm easily terrified, and that was really scary. Although what happened to all the other people in engineering? Because there were more people in there.
Suspiria starts lifting Janeway off the deck, and the ship begins to shake. On the bridge, Tom reports that the entire molecular structure of the ship is coming apart. Chakotay tries calling Janeway, as he needs somebody with a plan, and Harry reports they're losing hull integrity. Back in the mess, Tanis is telling Kes to forget these people. You'll be on them. But Kes isn't falling for it. Neelix tells him to leave her alone, but Tanis persists, reminding her of what she felt in the hydroponics bay. Kes tells Tanis to get away from her, but he continues trying to convince her, and Neelix again tells him to leave her alone. This time, Tanis turns and looks at Neelix, and Neelix is thrown across the mess.
Well, his body double.
Kes cries out to Neelix, but Tanis is now holding her, telling her, he's nothing compared to you, nothing. But Kes turns on him, and his face starts contorting in pain. He starts to bleed from his eyes and his nose, and Kes, who's now completely calm, just continues to stare at him. It's getting worse. Blood is now coming from both eyes and his ears.
Yeah.
In engineering, this starts affecting Suspiria, who clutches her stomach and doubles over in pain. Kes runs to tend to Neelix as Tanis falls to the ground. And in engineering, Suspiria also falls to the floor, releasing Janeway, B'Elanna, and Tuvok. Janeway springs into action, immediately taking up the Sporocystian poison gun and shoots Suspiria, knocking her out as Tuvok erects a containment field. Good job, everyone. Good job.
That's why she's the captain.
Suspiria recovers quickly, saying, so now you will kill me as you did my mate? Janeway calmly replies, no, we didn't kill him. We don't want to hurt you, or anyone. We just want to get home. She puts down the weapon and orders Tuvok to release the force field. And that look on Tuvok's face is priceless. It's like
Yeah, he's like, is she gonna kill us all?
We're all gonna die.
Yeah. He's gonna be very confused about that on his podcast. How did that work?
Yes. Suspiria tells Janeway, you'd show mercy after what I did to you? And Janeway just replies yes. The devil child now turns into a giant purple cucumber with tentacles and disappears into a bulkhead. That effect looked a little hokey, but it was the 90s.
It worked.
In the mess, Tanis is trying to stand and just says, take me with you, please, and disappears. Back to engineering, and Tuvok reports she's descended into subspace and they can't track her position. She's gone.
Poor Janeway.
I couldn't quite tell there, but did she take the Caretaker rock with her?
Yes, she did. That's the implication, yeah.
We get a quick log from Janeway. They've resumed course, but the female Caretaker is out there with the power to get them home, and Janeway will use all her power to find her and convince her to do that. Well, it didn't seem to work this time, so...
But they're still leaving. They don't stay in this location, so she's not necessarily...
Yeah, can she move around subspace? Because if this was the area where she, hung out in the subspace pocket, wouldn't you think you'd need to stay there?
Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's like, I'm not sure you're going to do everything in your power, but I felt bad for Janeway. She just wants one thing to go her way. It's like, come on.
Back to Tuvok and Kes. I really like the scene and the conversation, so I think I've written down, pretty much all of it.
Okay.
Kes is continuing her training, and she tells Tuvok she cannot make water boil anymore. She also tells him she doesn't want to see that part of her again, the part that got pleasure from destroying the plants, and the part of her that was tempted to go with Tanis. She never knew she had such dark impulses. And Tuvok delivers yet more sage Vulcan advice, saying, do not fear your negative thoughts. They are a part of you. They are part of every living being, even Vulcans. Kes is surprised by this statement, and Tuvok tells her, the Vulcan heart was forged of barbarism and violence. We learn to control it, but it is still part of us. To pretend it doesn't exist is to create an opportunity for it to escape.
That's a good line.
And they begin the exercise that they were doing at the start of the episode. The end. What a great episode.
All right, let's go to over-analysis. You said you had a lot of stuff.
Okay, there's lots of things I want to talk about here. First of all, Suspiria believes Voyager killed the Caretaker. Why would she be exposing herself to this kind of danger? If you're smart and you looked at these humans and went, oh, they're pathetic little weak life forms, they can't do anything, I can easily crush them. But wait a second, they killed my ex and keep his remains in a jar.
Yeah.
Is this a deception? Are they really hunters of higher beings for fun? And they just present this side to lure us in. So when we get close to them, they show their real powers and murder us. The smart thing to do here would be avoid them completely. The humans, that is.
I'm guessing she just thought it was a lucky shot or something. that caused it. And she's still convinced that she's superior because realistically...
She is kind of full of it.
Yeah. Realistically, why would she even bother to appear in corporeal form? Yeah. She didn't need to.
And if she can use the Ocampa as her foot soldiers...
Exactly.
Get them to kill everybody on the ship.
Yeah. But I think it was a sort of classic villain where, she needed to give the speech of you killed my ex-boyfriend and I'm going to kill you.
Very true. Mm-hmm. And plus, it does seem like she is extraordinarily arrogant.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and probably her time artificially evolving the Ocampa has made her arrogance grow.
Oh, because she's running a cult and worshipped as like a god.
Exactly.
Now, is there any way Tuvok would actually allow Kes to be late to work with the Doctor?
No, I thought that too.
Yeah, he's a Vulcan. He loves process and rigor. He's probably got a form to fill out to send to the Doctor that he's doing training.
Yeah. We're staying right in our time window every time. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think Vulcans like paperwork and bureaucracy?
Yes, probably. I figure Kes, maybe in between her appointments, she would run to the aeroponics bay and touch her plants or something.
Oh.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Because, she's got a short lifespan. You got to stop and smell the flowers quite a bit.
Right. Well, you'd think she'd be on time for everything because you've got no time to waste. Clock's ticking.
Clock is ticking.
Next thing. So Suspiria and the Ocampa, they're connected, according to Tanis. I have a theory here. Mm-hmm. So the caretaker died because he was too old. Is she a similar age to the caretaker?
I wondered that too. But I also wondered maybe she was younger and that's why she ran off in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been that, or she ran off because of the thing that Tanis said about just keeping the Ocampa exactly the same. She probably saw that they could have changed them. But yeah, I wondered that too. Is she also near death? I don't know. They certainly don't touch on that.
Well, this is where I was wondering about the connection with the Ocampa. Is she using them to stay alive?
Oh, could be. Yeah, that's a good point.
Is she somehow feeding off them, or this, when she says when they get evolved enough, she'd take them to the, what was it, Exosia?
Mm-hmm. And consumes them.
Is this basically, I feed on their souls to keep me alive? Yeah.
I think you're onto something there.
I think there's a very dark side to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing. So why was she complaining about her ex, seeing as 300 years ago she left him?
Yeah.
Another thing I think comes out from this episode is I'm concerned that they need to go back and visit the Ocampa homeworld.
Yeah, see what's going on there.
Are they going to discover that now that whole region of space is now under the control of the empire of the Ocampa supremacy? That really there was this side of the Ocampa where they're brutal expansionists that would put the Klingons to shame? And the caretaker, he wasn't keeping the status quo. He was keeping the Ocampa under control because they'd be genocidal maniacs if they were allowed out.
Well, look, Kes has a violent streak. It comes out here, but it came out a couple of episodes ago as well, right?
When she was dealing with the Bothan.
Yes. So maybe what Tuvok is trying to uncover is actually something that the Ocampa spent generations trying to cover.
Oh, wow. That is a really good idea. Yeah.
And so maybe the original caretaker was sort of working with them on that, but this new caretaker was like, oh no, hey, let's get under the covers there. There's something way more fun under there. Let's get that out.
Oh dear. Next thing, I really like this idea of Voyager as the ship of death. I could just picture the Kazon telling stories about this brutal ship that brings war wherever it goes, and we just want to live in peace.
Right.
And sort of, Kazon propaganda, and then that story maybe getting told in a bar, and then being expanded upon. And so you end up with this whole Voyager appears in your system, and everybody dies.
Yeah. I mean, rumors spread pretty quickly and get embellished pretty quickly.
Right.
So, yeah, I also liked that they're like, everybody's afraid of you, and they're like, what are you talking about?
We're fun people.
Yeah.
And 2 quick points. I feel this episode is kind of showing the dark side of what happens when you ignore the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
Or some race doesn't have its version of that.
Agreed.
That you can end up with maybe not everybody, but some maybe scientists or people within your race going, hey, let's just lift up this other race and basically exploiting them for their own ends.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like this is one of those episodes that could have been a 2 or 3-parter if they'd looked a little bit more into what was going on with the Ocampa. Would like to have seen what was down on that station.
Oh, I'd love to have seen the station, but I think your idea of it being like the cult of Ducat, the cult of Suspiria.
Yeah. Part of that is probably just a storytelling technique that they use on television to just let people use their own imagination because they can't afford to do anything really expensive. So it's like this way.
You don't have to use the budget.
Yeah, you just guess kind of what's going on down there, and whatever it is that you guess will be good enough for the story. But I think they could have really gone into this quite a bit more. It would have been interesting.
Gosh, it would have been a great 3-story arc.
Mm-hmm. And even to use it as sort of a lesson about this is why we use the Prime Directive.
Yeah, this would be a great teaching opportunity for Janeway to basically say that. This is why you don't mess with other races' natural evolution.
Yeah, but no, we just dropped it.
And I think my final point is, so on the Array, they called the first alien the Caretaker. And this one we just called Suspiria. I think we need a better name. What are we going to call this one? My 2 possibles are the Cultist or the Soul Taker.
The not-so-caretaker. The uncaretaker. The harm doer. Yeah, some sort of cult leader name would be best. Yeah, I think your name is best if she truly is taking the Ocampa into that, whatever that thing is. The
Exosia.
Yeah, Exosia, which is really, you just come in here and I'm going to eat you. And you become part of me or whatever, then you're probably right about that.
And that wraps up my overanalysis. Over to you, Kim.
Well, I have a couple things we already talked about Cass and her violent streak, right? We talked about that.
It's a really good contrast, though, isn't it? Cass has great empathy. The way she sees the Doctor as another person, the way, Neelix talked about it of if someone was an outcast, Cass is going to be the person who befriends them.
Right, yes.
And then in contrast, you see how Cass can be absolutely, brutal. I think that's pointing to what Tuvok said, that Vulcans have this violent, emotional, brutal side.
Right, that they control. But also Vulcans are just so full of themselves. You think you have emotions? Our emotions are even bigger. Okay. So who knows?
There is that. Yeah. So it is a great contrast with Cass in her normal life and this side of Cass that can come out.
Well, the beauty of overanalyzing Star Trek is you could look at this in so many different ways. You and I have talked about this before, where I do think there is this side of women where we have had to repress a lot of things over time. Just for example, even in an office situation, if the woman gets upset, you're over emotional. And so you sort of learn to suppress things to the point that I've said to you many times that women, we don't even know what we can do sometimes or how mad we can get or, how out of control we can get. So you could look at Kes a little bit that way, when she has these violent moments where she doesn't even know how protective she can get of the people around her or of herself to the point that she causes harm when she doesn't even know that she can.
Right.
And then the other way that you can look at it is this sort of drug use metaphor that I was talking about before, because
that's a really fascinating
she
one.
talks about, how she doesn't want to see this side of herself again. Now, it's possible that this isn't even really a side of her, that instead it was Suspiria, like when she was feeling pleasure from destroying all the plants, right? This could just be, like you said, Suspiria sort of feeding that, or Tanis sort of feeding that and make it seem like this is something that she liked, or pushing the positives of it, pushing the sort of endorphins, and so making it seem like it's something that she's enjoying so that she'll do it more or whatever, right?
That's even worse. Yeah.
It could be that, or they're just bringing out all of these really negative things to make her think, wow, I do need to go with these people so that they will help me control it, right? Because otherwise I'm going to hurt somebody. So there's so many different ways that you could look at this, that it's also kind of cool that they've left it to our imagination to figure out. Part of me wishes we'd explore it in great depth and make more of a story about it. But the other part of me is like, oh, well, this is why we overanalyze Star Trek. Yeah,
if you'd made it a 2 or a 3-parter, you could explore more of that.
Right.
And you could fill in those blanks. But it does make it interesting when you don't, of what was Tanis actually doing? I like your idea that he's taking 2 approaches. One is come with me and you can be like all powerful. And the other one is, oh, if you stay here, you'll hurt these people with how strong you are.
You'll hurt your pets.
Yes.
The other thing I would say in overanalysis is Tanis says something to her about enhancing life. It sort of comes in that part where he's like, it's all the same, alive or dead, right? It's all the same. And she has the ability to enhance life. That made me, in that moment, think, oh, are we setting this up for Kes to have the ability to bring somebody back from the dead in the future, where she's able to sort of turn something from dead to alive in the way that she was able to turn something from alive to dead?
Well, there are some old Sith myths. You can bring people back from the dead. So, she was learning how to use the Force here.
Kind of. Or the dark side, for sure.
Yeah.
Did Tanis go to the place of thought in subspace permanently in this episode? Like, is he never to return?
Yeah.
Do we think that's what happened?
That's what I assumed, that she took Tanis into Exosia.
Interesting.
Because of the way he disappeared. It didn't seem like a teleport.
Right.
But she could have just put him back on the station. I mean, we don't, again, it's we don't know.
Yeah, because the Caretaker had that power to just move the people around. Yeah, good point.
Right,
good point. Because I was thinking that poor guy, he woke up in a whole different day with how that day ended. He was not...
Top of the world,
He was not having a good time,
getting beaten up by the Acolyte.
And then the last thing in my notes is, why so many evil kids in Voyager? What do we have against children?
Devil children. Something I suddenly thought of, is there going to be a food crisis on Voyager now because she just killed all the plants?
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully she figures out how to get them all back and growing again quickly. Well, in Women in the Future, I sort of already covered what I wanted to say about women, so I will go to Janeway's leadership corner. And there was that weird little moment where Janeway looked at Chakotay, and I don't know if that was just sort of an acting thing, where she was just turning and looking, and then they ended up showing his face, and he did nothing and said nothing. I thought that was really a strange little moment.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but I also thought she showed her leadership strongly in multiple ways in this episode. One way was when she told Kes, hey, you got to be cautious. But she maybe didn't show enough leadership by keeping an eye on that and looking into that and, and checking in on what was going on there, because it was really sort of telling what Tanis was doing.
Right. I think she would want to debrief Kes after every time she met and talked with Tanis.
Yeah, because there was a lot of downtime when they were waiting for Suspiria and all of that, right? She could have done something, but we didn't do that. Probably just not enough time in the episode. I also think it was good that she allowed Tuvok to make that weapon. I thought that was her sort of showing the same caution. Maybe she's learned, okay, I need to be playing both sides here because this is not Federation space. There's all kinds of crazy crap that goes on out here. So we do need to protect ourselves. So I thought that was showing good leadership as well.
And I think that tied back to her looking at Chakotay, because I don't think in normal circumstances the captain would approve making a weapon.
Yeah. I think this was related to their time, their 10 months, right, in the Delta Quadrant. Yeah, agreed.
This you could look at as, this is the evolving Janeway of what's procedure. It's what we need to do to survive.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say is that I thought it was quite important that she was the one who picked up the weapon and that it wasn't Tuvok.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good moment for the captain. It didn't have to be, I'm not saying because it was Janeway or a woman, but because I thought that was the important moment for the captain.
Right. The captain making the decision to deploy the weapon.
Correct.
Plus, it is Action Janeway.
Yeah, she was Action Janeway. Okay, let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
It might surprise you. 2 thumbs up. I thought this was a great episode.
Why would it surprise me?
There's so much good stuff in this. There's great interaction with Tuvok. Kes is awesome. The villain, the guy, he absolutely got the brief of what he needed to do. Tanis was a great villain. And I think the overall story worked really well. Really enjoyable episode. Lots of overanalysis. Tons of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
It worked as a great self-contained episode. I would love to have seen this as a 2 or a 3-parter. But it exists as it does. Great Voyager episode. 2 thumbs up. Rewatchability is fantastic.
Yeah, I'll also give it a thumbs up. I thought performances were really good. And I thought the story was good. And Star Trek, at least during the TNG times, they would, more than once, they used this trope that a man using mind power is sort of sexually assaulting a woman. And I have to say, I expected something like that when this episode started, because I didn't remember it. like usual. So far, the only episode I've really remembered is Twisted.
Twisted, yeah.
But I didn't remember this one. I vaguely remember them running into this other caretaker alien or whatever they're called. But I expected there to be a violent element, which fortunately was not there. And I really appreciate that. I've talked about this before. It's not because that isn't something that happens, but as a viewer, as a woman viewing this kind of show, I don't just want to be inundated with that all the time. It's a lot for a woman to have to process and to watch. And it should be a lot for everybody to have to process and watch. I'm probably being too narrow there in what I'm saying, but it's unnecessary that we have to show it all the time. And it's something that essentially ruins one of the Star Trek Next Generation movies for me, because it happens in Nemesis, and I found it really unwatchable and awful.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy we didn't use that trope here. We didn't need it. It was completely unnecessary, and we didn't do it. So I appreciate that. But in general, I did think this was a pretty good episode of Voyager.
Excellent.
Well, that wraps up Season 2, Episode 10. Come back next week for Episode 11. Although now we have to look at our schedule and see when Prodigy is going to come up, because it might not be next week.
Yes.
We'll have to figure that out. I better look at that after this one. Because Prodigy is coming July 1st, and we are recording this early June, but by the time this one goes out as a podcast, it'll probably be July. So there might be some mix-up coming.
Interruptions.
Yes, with how we're going to do Prodigy, but we haven't figured that out yet. So, in the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on the socials at ReBingeIT. We are on the thing that used to be called Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, all at ReBingeIT. And you can also join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.